The first game of the week, we saw Miami versus UAB on the Thursday night ACC kickoff game. I don't know how much I learned about either one of those teams. Quite frankly, it turned out the way I thought it would. Miami did start out a little bit slow in the game. I mean, obviously, the big story of the Miami season this year is their offense and how's D'Eriq King going to look. I thought D'Eriq King looked pretty good, all things considered. Again, they started out slow, but we'll go through some of these other games, and most of these teams started out slow with the exception of Oklahoma, Clemson, maybe. But most of these teams started out slow. It's been an odd year with the pandemic. They've had a lot of restrictions in practice. Some of these teams didn't even have spring ball. So it's been a weird sort of year. So it didn't surprise me. Now, you have any thoughts on Miami in general, what you saw?
Like you say, D'Eriq King was the storyline, the guy that everybody had a look for. And I think he brought to the table exactly what he is. He's going to be the most dynamic Miami quarterback we're going to see and have seen for a long, long time. And I don't think he's some kind of elite passer by any stretch of the imagination, but he's an upgrade even there where he's going to make the right decision. He's got a lot of games under his belt. He's going to do the right things, but he brings a dimension to that offense that they haven't had. And just in terms of stability, they're going to be better, I think. The offensive line still has issues, pass blocking, but this is where I don't know how much we can take from it. They pushed around UAB up front, got some running room. Cam Harris had a huge day, but I don't know if that translates. Had a bit of a disagreement with one of my Miami guys, Cam Underwood, who came on, who was saying, yeah, UAB is probably like a top 30, 35 team in the nation. And I'm like, this is with all the teams not playing, right?
Yeah, right.
No, he's like, no. And no, they're not a top 30, 35. They're not Virginia. They're not fill in the blank from the ACC. No, they're 70, 75. You know, they've been playing. Look at UAB going to a conference championship game last year and the year before winning the conference. The Power Five that they've played these last 3 or 4 years since they came back from not having football for 2 years, and even a 4-7 Florida team drubbed them by 29 points. You know, they've been losing those games by 3 or 4 touchdowns. So what Miami did, I think, is passing the test. It's like, okay, it's, you know, they took control in the third quarter, but it's by no means like some great statement that the Canes made.
Yeah, they definitely have some improving to do. However, some of the other teams we saw in the ACC, Miami is still certainly in the thick of things. But Luke Walker brings up a great point here, and we'll get it right into this now. He says, everyone acts like North Carolina barely beat Syracuse, and it's really starting to annoy me. This is another game that started out sort of slow for North Carolina. They ended up pouring it all over them in the second half. I still believe Sam Howell is one of the top quarterbacks in the country. Maybe they were a little bit overhyped coming into the season, even by people like myself. But looking at the landscape of the ACC, I mean, we with Florida State is way worse than we thought. We just talked about Miami having some of their struggles. It's still Clemson and everybody else. And so, I mean, North Carolina is still in the thick of things, right up there with Clemson and Notre Dame, as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, definitely. I don't take too much away from that. They did what they needed to do. It wasn't pretty. I think some of our expectations for some of these teams is that they're just going to go out against a group of 5 or a low-level team in their own conference, and it's got to be 28-0 in the first quarter. And It wasn't that. And, yeah, they struggled, but they haven't thrown against, live bullets in forever, and it took them a while to get going. Syracuse has scholarship athletes. They're not very good and probably won't be good. I think I projected 3-8 this year for Syracuse, but it was 10-6 going into the fourth. I think all 3 second-half touchdowns were in the fourth quarter, so it took them a while to get going. But, look at the flip side. Everybody looks at offense. Look at the defense. North Carolina, they gave up their least amount of points in an ACC opener in like 11 or 12 years, their least amount of yardage. Had one of their better performances on defense that they've had in a long time. And sure, Syracuse, again, they can't block up front for Tommy DeVito. He got sacked 7 times. But I think North Carolina, I don't think you can take anything away to say, wow, they're great or they're not. They took care of business against a team that they should.
I completely agree. And we'll see what Sam Howell looks like going forward. He had a couple of rocky moments in that game, but towards the end of the game, he started to look like the Sam Howell of old. And we people forget he's a true sophomore.
Yeah.
So he's only played one season, basically, one season and one game. And sometimes, especially like we were talking about before with the limitations in practice and the weird sort of COVID year, sometimes it takes some of these quarterbacks, especially the younger guys, a little bit of time to get going. So I'm still looking for good things out of North Carolina. I haven't jumped off yet just because they struggled for a half against Syracuse. Moving on to the Louisville game, Louisville and Western Kentucky. That went pretty much as the way I thought it would. This leads us into a game we're going to talk about next week with Miami and Louisville. I think that's the game of the week coming up.
Yes.
So do you know where game day is going to be? I would imagine that would be where it would be.
That usually comes out today.
Okay.
Not being where I typically and have been on a Monday in the past. I haven't found that out, but I don't know. But and that was the one thing that struck me, just kind of getting away from the game wraps, but just the overall impression of the weekend, besides the no fans in the stands. And in some games there were pockets of fans, and what did that look like, and what did they do, and how much of impact did that have? Was oh man, I love that college football's back. And again, I'm not dismissing the first week, but in terms of diving into Power 5 teams playing, it's awesome that college football's back. But where I'm sure you're the same way, Pigskin, at noon, starting at noon, man, I am like, man, I got to have a lineup, like a priority list of, okay, that gets the big screen, this gets the laptop, that gets the other laptop, and I want to see like 8 games at the same time.
Yeah.
Well, Saturday, I'm like, who's playing?
Right.
There's really not a whole lot. I'm locked in on Iowa State and Lafayette at noon because I don't get the ACC network. That was the game I wanted to see, but so I'm watching, Lafayette and Iowa State and trying to be happy about that, because there's just not a whole lot. And your boys playing a primetime game. Now, come on.
Yeah. I imagine a game day in Wake Forest. When's the last time that happened? Has it ever happened?
I don't think it's ever happened.
No, I don't think it'll ever happen again, most likely either.
But talk about most impressive. I think we discard Wake Forest as being, well, it's Wake Forest. The Wake Forest, I think it's maybe the most disrespect for what they've actually been in the last 3-4 years under Dave Clawson. They've been really, really good. 7-5, 8-4 every year, go to a bowl game, usually win the bowl game. And Clemson can just trounce them. Forget 37-13. That was not a 37-13 game.
No, it could have been 55-7 if they wanted, or 55-0.
Yeah, and Wake Forest is maybe they might be a little bit down this year, but man, they've been cranking out 7-8 wins a year. So your boys can play, of course.
Well, I don't know how many players they brought to travel to Wake Forest, but they played every single one of them, and everybody but the water boy played in that game. And we got to see some of the young guys. I'm excited about Clemson, man. I mean, they played 2 true freshmen on the defensive line, Miles Murphy and Brian Brzee, and between the 2 of them, they had 3 sacks, I think. DeMarcus Bowman, the highly touted running back out of the state of Florida, who's a true freshman this year, came in the second half, looked really good. Same thing with DJ Uiagalelei. Got some flashes from him of what he can be. I mean, that kid, he's visually stunning to be 18 years old. He looks like Cam Newton did when he was a senior at Auburn.
That was amazing how that rolled off your tongue, Pigskin. I think the game announcers, I think it was Fowler and Herbstreit, I think, were doing that game. They even said we're going to bypass on the last name a few times.
I've had a lot of practice.
Let that go.
I've had a lot of practice. I used to call him. I did used to mispronounce his name, but then I heard him say his own name.
Yeah.
So I said, if anybody knows how to pronounce the name, it's him, because it's his name. And so I just copied it. It's once it's like anything else. What do they say? You become an expert at something after doing it 10,000 times.
Yeah, that's it.
That's where I am.
That's it.
But anyway, Uiagalelei looked really good. DeMarcus Bowman looked really good. EJ Williams, the wide receiver, true freshman, looked really good. So Clemson's offense depth is even with Justin Ross being out on the season, their offensive depth is really good. And Len J. Dixon didn't even travel; he was injured, and he's the running back number 2. We saw a lot of Darian Rensher, obviously a lot of ETN. He had over 100 yards in the first quarters. So yeah, I'm very excited about them. And like you said, they can really just blow everybody out in the ACC as far as I'm concerned this year. The only team that I think that can give them a challenge, it may be Notre Dame on the road, but we have to see how Notre Dame look. So they another team this week that sort of struggled, Notre Dame.
Yeah.
At the beginning.
Yeah, the offensive stats from the first quarter of that game were like 151-13. Like Duke came out, should have had a bigger lead, only got a field goal, but 151-13 for an entire quarter. So it took Notre Dame a while to get it cranked up. This Kyron Williams at running back, though, had a huge day. 93 in the air, 112 on the ground. Ian Book didn't have to throw it downfield a whole lot, but they did what they needed to do. And I'm going to put that in the category of, yeah, it was 17-13 pretty late in that game. So yeah, they didn't look impressive, but when they needed to be the dominant team, they were in the fourth quarter and put it away. So we'll see more on Notre Dame, of course, here pretty soon.
Yeah, and I'm putting them in the same categories. I'm giving some of these teams a bit of a pass. Miami, North Carolina, I'm putting Notre Dame in that category too.
Yeah.
As far as just having a slow start doesn't mean that that's what we're going to see every single week out of them. And plus, we were just talking about Dave Clawson and the job that he's doing at Wake Forest. Let's not overshadow the fact. I mean, the ACC is full of really good coaches with mediocre talent.
Yes.
And so David Clawson is the king of that and has proven that over his time at Duke. Now, he's had some bad seasons, but they've had some bad teams. And but for the talent level that they have there, he's had some really good season. He's even had a 10-win season there, which is something that's unheard of at Duke. So yeah, and obviously the talent level at Notre Dame is second to Clemson only, probably in the ACC. I mean, do you think there's another team in the ACC that has the talent level? I'm not talking about coaching or anything, but is there another team? I mean, the one that would come to mind to me would be Florida State, but I don't even know if that's true anymore.
Somebody else that's with Notre Dame?
Somebody, yeah.
There's nobody with Clemson.
No, I'm saying there's Clemson
with Notre Dame.
Number 2 talent level in the ACC. It's got to be Notre Dame at this point. Right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I thought. I would have said last year maybe Florida State is as talented.
Yeah, if you just look at recruiting rankings.
Right. Yep. Right. That's what I'm talking about.
Which I think we hit on the big loser of the weekend. Not just in the ACC. That's a game that people didn't think they were going to lose. I heard a few people every so often, and I even threw it out there. This is not just we're going to roll out there and win by 21, and that's going to be it. I didn't expect that kind of game either, but Florida State dominated the first quarter, 10-zip. They were the much better team early, and I thought, okay, well, my pick of Georgia taking Georgia Tech in 12.5 is in jeopardy here, but man, that's a shocking loss. That's a horrible loss for a team, Pigskin, that when I was looking at the ACC schedules, only Wake, who we don't expect to contend seriously, Florida State's the only team in the league that has to face Clemson, Notre Dame, Miami, and North Carolina.
Yes.
And they lose to Georgia Tech.
And
I picked them 6-5, and I took all sorts of flack from Florida State fans for going 6-5. Well,
that might be high now. It could be more like 5 and 6.
Yep.
If they even went 5, I don't know. That was shocking to me. I will admit.
Yeah.
I expected to see an improvement, even though they still had a lot of holes in the offensive line and all of that. But I still thought that Mike Norvell could get a team together that could compete with the Georgia Tech. Let's not forget, Georgia Tech is in year 2 of a complete overhaul of their team, at least offensively. I won't say defensively. Sure. And the better quarterback on the field looked like Georgia Tech's quarterback, and they're in year 2 now of recruiting wide receivers that do more than just block.
Yeah. Freshman quarterback.
They looked Georgia Tech looked more disciplined. They looked like they wanted it more. Clearly they wanted it more.
Yeah.
They just looked like a better coach team. By the way, I'm impressed with what Jeff Collins is doing there.
Absolutely.
But I don't know if this tells me more about Georgia Tech or more about Florida. I think I learned more about Florida State.
I think so.
That they're a long way away. By a long way away, I mean a long way away from competing with anybody else in the ACC. Now, I'm not talking about Clemson.
Absolutely, because you expect
right now.
The offense had to get much better, and through one game, it's not showing us that it got any better, scoring 13 points against Georgia Tech. And the defense is supposed to be really good at Florida State, and maybe it will be, but we saw it against Georgia Tech, and all the metrics coming into the season from last year where Georgia Tech was like one of the 3 or 4 worst in the nation in yards per play and red zone offense, and had the most 3-and-outs of anybody in the country. And the 2 picks thrown by Sims were awful. but understandable. He's a true freshman.
Yeah.
He played a great game, and for him to come back from adversity, because those picks were like they were going to score on those. They were in the red zone.
Yeah.
And he made two awful decisions, and they had 3 blocked kicks. So they got to clean up the special teams. But when do you have 3 blocked kicks on the road and still come away with a win as a 12.5-point underdog?
Right. That's the story of the weekend. And I picked Florida State to not only win, but to cover the 12 points or 12.
Yeah, I thought about it. Sure.
No. So it was just unbelievable. That game was unbelievable. I think it was the bad apple of the weekend. Especially if you're a Florida State fan, you've got to just say, okay, what we need to do now is just improve from week to week. Forget this idea that you're going to go to the ACC championship because we're having the round robin thing this year. Just forget about all that. Set your expectations to getting better every week. And maybe next year you can try to compete for something. I don't know what to tell you. It's going to be ugly. Let's see. Pitt had a 55-0 win over, I think, Austin Peay. That's really a non-story there.
They ran the clock. Did you hear this? So in the second half, they only played 10-minute quarters. It was 42-0 at half, and the two teams decided we're only playing 10-minute quarters in the third and fourth.
They ran the time off the clock?
Well, I don't know. I started to say that, yeah, and take that back. They had 10-minute quarters the last 2 quarters.
Yeah, same thing. Yeah. I don't think I've ever heard of that happening before.
In a big-time college football game. To where the one team's basically saying, we suck, we've got no shot at coming back, and we want to limit this scoring as much as possible. So I don't know if I want to send that message to my team if I'm a head coach that I don't have any confidence in you, so we don't want to get our brains beaten.
I mean, if that's your concern, you may as well just say we forfeit the game and just pack it in. Yeah. Just go ahead and go home. Don't risk any injury. So that's a non-story there, Pitt. Although I will tell you, my prediction for Pitt this year is I'm expecting them to be tough. For as far as Notre Dame goes, that they have to go on the road to play Pitt, have to go on the road to play North Carolina, and obviously they have Clemson in South Bend. But those are 3 losable games. I mean, obviously Clemson's a losable game.
A stat that I missed in the offseason and picked this up preparing for like week 1 or whatever, that I didn't realize Pitt's defense was 4th in the nation in yards per play last year. Yeah. Like they were that good on defense last year. Now Kenny Pickett's coming back. He's not great, but he's a 4th-year starter. He's been there forever.
I've seen some people say that Pitt might have the best defensive line in the ACC by a team not named Clemson. Yep. And so I'm looking forward to seeing how they look against, real competition. We didn't learn anything from Austin Peay.
No, they did lose their best one though. Jalen Twyman decided to opt out.
Right.
Yeah.